how can we predict the thing that's going to blow us up? You know, the whole point of something blowing you up is that you don't know and you don't see it coming. I don't know. I don't think you can predict what's coming, but I'm afraid, but also excited. I guess that's what the internet is these days, being terrified and excited at the same time.
Welcome to Crashed, the tech podcast about everything else. Today, that means we're not really doing anything about tech, to be honest, but we are going to try and predict what 2026 will hold with the friends of Crashed, anyone who's got in touch, and all manner of brilliant and wonderful ideas on their way. I'm Alex Hudson.
I'm Chris Stoker-Walker, and we're maybe going to add AI to that list as well, because if we discussed one thing at the end of last episode, it was that 2025, a lot didn't happen, but there was some stuff in AI.
How can you remember so long ago since we recorded our last episode? How can you? That was 2 weeks ago.
How was your Christmas, Alex?
Just to ruin it, don't lie. We are recording this before Christmas. We're recording this just after we recorded the one that you hopefully have already listened to. But we are Happy New Year. Yes, we meant to say that. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, happy 2026. I hope 2026. I sound like I'm being the Queen or something here. I hope 2026 treats you well.
King. King.
Yeah, no, but, I don't want to be the king. I feel like I want to be the queen in this instance. Okay, Alex, put the words where your mouth is. Give us your predictions for 2026. The whole reason that we are doing this is a 2026 predictions episode. Our listeners expect it. What are your predictions for 2026?
The reason we are doing this episode is so that we can make other people braver or more intelligent or sharper or with more briefing than we have to make these predictions. So that's why we've got such a range of brilliant, wonderful people coming up to give all of theirs. I think, as we were talking about off air, it is foolish to make such firm predictions except in things you're very sure about. But I think my one prediction is there will be, this is pushing the limits of where tech starts and politics ends, but I think there will be a leadership challenge against Keir Starmer in 2026. I don't think it would necessarily will be successful. I think that is, no one's going to make a prediction on that, but I do think there will be a leadership challenge, most likely after the May 2026 local elections. And I do think that agentic AI will actually become, more and more audience will become aware of it, even if it doesn't quite do what it's meant to yet. That by the end of this coming year will become the sort of buzzword in a way that it was meant to be by the end of this year. I said I wasn't going to make any predictions, and I made one really bold one and one kind of nuanced one. So, I mean, I'm going to play it right back to you. What are your massive predictions?
Okay, I've got two for you. One really bold one, one really nuanced one. The really nuanced one is, over the course of this podcast, you will hear a lot of people who are saying very interesting things.
That's bullshit. I mean, that you're absolutely not getting away with that.
You haven't got my bold one. You haven't got my bold one yet.
What's not even a nuanced prediction?
Second one, the bold one, is Alex will slam his head off the desk at least 3 times in the editing of this episode. Have a very happy new year, and let's get on with the episode.
Okay, how about you actually give a real prediction?
I don't have one. A genuine prediction that I have for 2026. And I'm willing to be wrong on this. I think that you will see one relatively large AI company thinking, well, this isn't really worth it for me in terms of giving all of the models that I give out, the general purpose chatbot models. And I don't think it'll necessarily be Claude, right? I mean, I don't think it is, but they are third in a 2-horse race, effectively. We've talked about this before in terms of the UK is third in a 2-horse race worldwide. I don't think Claude will give up, but I think that there will be some of those that are kind of currently still being used, those LLMs. Maybe it's Manus. Like, I don't know who uses Manus. I have Manus on my phone and I have a year-long subscription, which will expire in 2026 because I used it for an agentic AI task that I wanted once and accidentally signed up for the year-long trial rather than the month-by-month one. I'm not going to renew that. So maybe Manus throws in the towel in 2026 and says, you know what? Everybody else is doing it better. Let's let DeepSeek on the Chinese side do it. Let's let Google and ChatGPT on the US side do it. I think we're going to see a thinning out a little bit of the race here.
I think you're wrong on Claude. I think I've had a number of briefings around the sorts of LLMs and AIs more broadly with people that are very familiar with the matter. And from what I've been told, Claude and Anthropic more generally is in a really strong place. And so I think you're right that there will be a thinning out potentially of those AIs that aren't really AIs, But I think when it comes to a pure LLM play, I think there is still enough venture capital in that space and still enough in that space that there may be one or two drop-offs, but I think we're still another 18 months away from that real sort of moment. And I think 2026 actually stands to be the moment where things start looking to public funding and going public and entering stock markets.
I agree, but I didn't say that Claude will drop out. I said that Claude will probably be the baseline. Anthropic and below is probably where you start to go. This is an area where there are going to be 3 or 4 runners and riders. There's not going to be 7 or 8, and there have been 7 or 8 for the first 3 years of this stuff. As we move into year 4 of the generative AI revolution, I'm not convinced that this can sustain quite as many entrants into the market.
And now, finally, Chris gave a real prediction, which I'm very appreciative of. Now I'll actually get into the real predictions of people who know way more than we do about all of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Hello, I'm Olly Mann from The Week Unwrapped and other podcasts. We talk about news and tech and trends and stuff. And so something that's become very obvious to me when I'm thinking about a prediction for the year ahead in tech is that this kind of environment, podcasting, is shifting. It's been shifting in 2023 and 2024 because of the rise of video and social video. I'm being filmed at the moment rather than recorded on a microphone. And people have embraced that because it means it's marketing for their show. Spotify are more likely to feature them, etc., because they're on video. But I think we're at a tipping point where what used to be the safe space of podcasting, where you can say what you really think, forget that there are people listening, I feel like 2026 is the year that will actually be over. Transcription software is accelerating. If I say something now on a podcast, I don't have the assurance that the people that are listening, as used to be to me, will be hearing that in context and understanding the nuance of what I was saying, or that it was a joke, or know me and my personality from listening to me for 2 decades. I think now, whatever you say, you have to be aware it could be clipped up and put on social media, and someone will turn it into a joke, or someone will be inferring something about what you think about other things on the basis of something that you said in offhand way on the podcast. I think that's really detrimental to real conversations that reflect how people think, which is what people really like about podcasting, a sense of authenticity. And I worry that one of the things that made me fall in love with podcasting and a whole audience come and find us, that sort of genuine, natural, it sounds like I'm in the pub with you, sort of social relationship you have, real conversation, that will be gone. But I think in 2026, what we will see is a big news story about something someone said on a podcast maybe years ago that's now being clipped up and resurfaced in a way people used to think when they were on podcasts couldn't happen. They knew that if you said something to the press in a press conference, that would get clipped up. They knew if you said something on Parkinson, that would get clipped up. But a podcast used to be like the naughty behind the scenes quiet chat where you say what you really think. I think that's dead.
That's an interesting set of predictions from Olly. A really interesting set of predictions. The grim takeaway, which is that 2026 is going to be the year that podcasts become shit because people are worried about saying anything slightly interesting. But nonetheless, well done for starting us in 2026 with such a grim outlook. I do think that is interesting, though, because I find myself doing this already. And in part, this is just a consequence of the fact that podcasts now are too long, particularly those ones that I'm more likely to have to engage with for my work. So like kind of Tech Bro, Silicon Valley podcasts where you have like a 4-hour long conversation with some machine learning engineer at Google about the deep details of whatever. Since the release of Gemini 3, no longer listen to it, no longer scrub through it. Instead, I stick it into Gemini and I say, summarize this for me. Make sure you give me the timestamps for where the things are said that are interesting. But I agree, that idea of the death of consuming original content and instead just getting the kind of summaries of it, very much bob on.
You took that entirely differently to the way I took it. I took it as like podcast still maintaining, but actually it's the death of the safe space. So it's not that people will stop listening to it. It's that now the sort of top of the user funnel is the 1-minute TikTok clip. Please watch our TikTok clips. And then, I think it's 20 times as many people listen to the watch is on TikTok as listen to the podcast. So that rings true, if not more. And it's more that now, it was this, you had to choose the podcast you listen to. You had to invest 30 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour into a podcast. And so by choosing that, you were already a friend of the show. It's very rare that you would hate listen for an hour or every week or every 2 weeks or however long that is. And what that changes is that it's no longer people who understand that this nuanced, complicated point around a difficult issue, whether that be certain rights, certain human rights, policy, all of these things that you can have really in-depth conversations when the answer is it depends, or it's complicated, or both, or neither. What that gets drilled down to is a minute soundbite. And I think Olly, who I first interviewed maybe 15 years ago about the death of podcasting, that article aged well. He's such a sort of old hand and experienced hand in this world. He's one of the sort of leading podcasters. And for him to say that it no longer feels like a safe space is frightening, but he knows, he would know.
I don't think that we are coming at this from completely opposite ends. I think it's just, you're talking rightly about the fact that if you are committed to a podcast, you will be committed to that podcast. But in terms of gaining new audiences or finding new listeners, the grazing that you would usually have is going to be done in a slightly different way, whereas you no longer have to actually engage with the original source of content. You can just feed it into an LLM and say, is this of interest to me? Give me the top lines for what they've said. I think that is, the same sort of thing in terms of clipping and taking things out of context.
Then you're in a world where we have spent the last 2 decades removing gatekeepers of content or allowing the democratization of content. You're allowing Google to be your new gatekeeper of content. I suppose that's an extension of the SEO algorithms and all of the social algorithms, but it's the same idea.
Yeah, but this is happening in every which way that's going on. Now, I try and tackle my inbox by using Gemini prompts to say, what should I pick out that is interesting? Because I'm just being submerged by it. We've seen Amazon releasing a new Kindle feature in the dying weeks of 2025, saying that you can now engage in an LLM conversation with your Kindle reads, which is just depressing because it means that you can ask it, well, what did the author mean here? And it doesn't necessarily know what the author meant, but it will take all of the analysis that has been on the internet about what the author's intentions were in that choice of characterization or anything like that. And it'll give it to you as if it is a fully assumed fact. So, yeah, I guess it's a consequence of the fact that we're being submerged in so much stuff. The idea of AI slop is, being counteracted in some ways by AI gatekeepers. None of this is good, but it's something that we have to deal with.
Then, in direct answer to Olly's prediction, who's getting cancelled in 2026 for something they said in the podcast?
Probably me. I don't know how, but we'll see. That's the prediction.
If that is the case, something has gone horribly. You're taking a turn down a dark bit of the internet. And on that note, we should definitely move on to the next prediction.
Hi, I'm Ellen C. Scott, digital editor at Stylist Magazine and the author of Working on Purpose. And I predict that something I'm calling smooth out will be a big trend in 2026. Smooth out is the term I've coined to describe the mental impact of our increasing over-reliance on AI. Essentially, the human brain craves a bit of challenge and mastery. I'm worried that when we use AI and LLMs to do anything we might find challenging, such as writing an email or figuring out how to fix a coding issue, it smooths out the process to our detriment. I think in the same way that we've previously had to navigate burnout and bore out, next we're going to have to tackle smooth out. It's really tempting to take the easier, smoother path, but this is the year we're going to start to notice the impact, whether that's feeling really sluggish and uninspired, or losing the ability to problem solve and do difficult things.
Love it. Do you feel smoothed out? How smooth are you, Alex?
Firstly, Alan, thank you very much. It's really appreciated. I think that with the smoothing out of things, I think she's right, wholeheartedly correct about something is happening. So the idea that now you would instantly get rid of a CV or a job application if there was a spelling mistake in there, we're moving along that line of at what point we are smoothing out more and more things, so paragraph styles or narratives or particular fact checkers, all of these sort of things. But then alongside that, we're homogenizing into this, as we move away from monoculture, the way that we write and the way that we speak is homogenizing because of these LLMs. So I think she's putting a nice spin on it, calling it a smoothing. I think it's a sort of a blanding. No, I mean, she's always been better with the branding terms than I ever was, but the sort of beigification of what's happening there.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's a kind of distant cousin of cognitive offloading, and there was the concept of that mentioned in what she said. But I think that in itself is particularly intriguing because acts of creativity require overcoming challenges. She didn't mention writer's block. I kind of imagined at one point she was going to say, writer's block is something that is a challenge that we have to overcome, and increasingly people are using the easy way out by deploying generative AI to solve the problem. But actually, ruminating on stuff is something that we don't have the ability to do much these days. And actually, it's from those moments of introspection, of thinking about these things in a similar way that Olly was talking about. If we just feed podcasts into AI summarization tools, we don't actually engage with the content and we don't appreciate the nuance or anything that goes into it. There's something beautiful in the flawed nature of humanity, and that's what's driven our culture for many years. And I think that's why people are concerned about the rise of AI, particularly in the cultural industries. I think they're, in many ways, the concerns around copyright, and we discussed that a little bit in the last episode that we did before Christmas. That is a convenient rallying point for some of the discomfort that we feel that we can't more easily express in other ways around the rise of AI and the impact that it has on culture. We reach for the easy one, which is, well, this is running roughshod through copyright, but actually there are deeper concerns there, which include this idea that we don't have the ability to cherish the flawed aspects, like the flick of a paintbrush or the thorny plot hole that you've got to try and fix through some clever characterization in a novel. This is my romantic English literature BA coming through here a little bit, but like all authors are flawed and tortured, and they're trying to come over these issues that they encounter through their creative process. And I guess what Ellen's saying there is we lose something when we smooth it out somewhat.
And so I think that's the negative side of it. And I think that's, but the thing is, it removes a job. So if you have, in the way that spell check saved you so much time, being able to Google something to check it rather than having to go to the library to find out something, just save time. And in the same way that within DJing is now so much better than it was because of all of the automations that can happen that mean your beat matching isn't necessarily something that you are thinking about. So it means what do you add to it? What else do you do? And if we are talking about the smoothification of a thing, or the smoothing out, that was Ellen's term, then what makes it, what is the human element to making it spiky again? What are the sort of sharp edges? What is the innovation in this space? If everyone can do something to a certain standard, as we showed that we could make that mediocre steps song, once you get under the hood with that machine, my God, you can play with it, and it's almost as good as manual in a way that you don't need an orchestra, but you can manipulate it so that it can do exactly what you want. And it's the skill set within the prompting, within the difficult business of the humanizing of it, that I think the smoothing out is a risk, but the people will come along and make it spiky, make it edgy, make it interesting, and that's the next phase of innovation.
I don't remember the historical analogy. I'm perhaps confusing my literary movements. I don't think it was the rise of absurdism in response to things like the mechanization of production and typewriters and things like that. But there's absolutely been movements in the past around this. And I think that's what we kind of need to delve into, to use a horrible AI word that makes it sound like I'm reading from a ChatGPT generated script, but I promise I'm not.
But if you don't know, you could ask it LM and it would tell you.
Yeah, well, I did. I asked Perplexity, and it talked about theatre of the absurd and Beckett in the 1950s and the way that this was a response to the devastation of wars. So, I mean, that's the English literature side of things, which is the response to the machine guns was to have absurdist theatre. We're not quite at that stage with LLMs, I don't think, but we are getting close.
Next prediction.
Okay, what's ahead for 2026 with tech? Now, well, I should introduce myself actually first, sorry. Hi, I am H. Alan Scott. I am a writer, comedian, culture pursuer, and aggressively endorsee homosexual. That's my official title. If I had a LinkedIn, it would be on my LinkedIn. I think I have a LinkedIn. Does anyone use LinkedIn anymore? They probably do. I should, but I don't care. Ugh, that's what I want to go away in 2026 is LinkedIn. You can edit this, right? Yeah. What's ahead in tech in 2026? Now, I'm not one to necessarily predict what's coming or what's in the pipeline because I'm not smart enough for that. That said, I do know something I want from tech in 2026. And I want to stop that fear of the algorithm working against me. I know so many people can relate to this. I'm scrolling on whatever social media platform it is, Instagram, Facebook. Who's scrolling on Facebook? TikTok, Twitter especially. And if you spend more than a couple of seconds on a particular video or thing to try to figure out what it is, all of a sudden the algorithm is like, you like this. When in reality, I maybe just wanted to see someone shirtless. Or maybe I wanted to see what was going to happen to that particular potato. It doesn't mean I want my entire feed to be, well, I guess I kind of do want my entire feed to be shirtless men. But I don't necessarily want it to be all potatoes. Although that's not a bad thing either. Maybe this thing that I don't want is actually the thing that I probably need. Anyway, I'm afraid of the algorithm. And there's so much anxiety that I have existing around how much time I'm spending on a particular post, because I just know that for the next 3 weeks, that's going to be my social media thing. Like, that's going to be what they're going to feed me. And I don't necessarily want that. And it takes away the enjoyment of that particular app. And I actually love social media. I love what it can do. I love the possibilities of social media. I'm even excited about AI. I know that's crazy coming from a writer, but I actually am. There are things that I'm looking forward to that can benefit me in ways that I think are really good and interesting and can enhance the creativity that I already do. And the algorithm just gives me so much stress that it makes me not want to be creative or use a particular app because I'm afraid of what it's going to show me. And then on top of that, sometimes the algorithm starts feeding you things and you're like, what did I look at to make the algorithm think I wanted to see these things? Like, there are times where all of a sudden I got all these videos for like this weird device that opens cans, or scoops things out of, it opens, but it also can scoop things out of can. I don't know what I did to get that many videos on things like that. I don't open that many cans. I don't scoop that much stuff. Most of my stuff is just pretty much like spoon to mouth. And I don't know what I did to get that, but it was like that for like a month on TikTok for me. These are things that stress me out, and I wish they would go away in 2026. Do I have a prediction? Have I given you any predictions? I don't think I have. It's okay. How can we predict the thing that's going to blow us up? You know, the whole point of something blowing you up is that you don't know and you don't see it coming. So, I don't know. I don't think you can predict what's coming, but I'm afraid, but also excited. I guess that's what the internet is these days. Being terrified and excited at the same time. It's like young love, except immensely more dangerous.
So, for the benefit, like, we just watched a full 4 minutes and 52. It's a 5-minute clip, H. Allen. I mean, you took the brief, and they're an old colleague and a brilliant, brilliant human and incredibly funny and filled with the human condition. What they are trying to say, I think, is that the algorithm is taking them too literally. And I think that's because they're on the wrong social media. And I think that means that they're relying too much on Instagram. And I think that means that the TikTok is already ahead with that, in that it doesn't give you what you tell it you want. It gives you what it knows you do want. And I think with the institutification of everything, that will get worse, because they will try and sell you some god-awful thing that you clicked on once. I think H. Allen is right in that. But outside of the selling business, I think the algorithms are getting better in serving you things that you will engage with, because the attention economy is getting ever harder to manage, but it's getting better at what it does.
Some algorithms, right? Not all algorithms in this instance, because as H. Allen points out, they are dead on in terms of how X will just pummel you with the same old stuff. And I have, the clip was quite so funny because it does mimic exactly what everybody thinks, right? This is a big issue, but you're just being pummeled with the same content. And same thing on Facebook as well. I think that's what is interesting to me is that they've managed to predict in a very roundabout way, and they are fantastic value for money. They should be hosting all of our podcasts, I think, and just
I think they already host enough podcasts.
Well, quite, but they would immediately add to our runtime and double it, I think. But that would be uproariously entertaining regardless. I think what they have hit on is that actually they've made a prediction while not necessarily thinking that they had made a prediction, which is we're seeing what happens in the death spirals of certain social media platforms, which is their algorithms start to fail a little bit. They don't malfunction in the way that we might expect, but they are just showing the same sort of content, small iterative variations on it, but not really providing any sort of fulfillment. And we've seen that with Facebook, in part because of just the fact that all humans have basically abandoned that platform, unless you are of a certain demographic and a certain age, in which case you're probably just clinging on, but you are certainly being outnumbered by the inauthentic sort of stuff. Clinging on both to the platform and also probably clinging on to life, but that's another thing. But also on X, I think, is a similar sort of thing happening, right? Where people are abandoning that, so there are fewer and fewer bits of authentic content, which means that you are being pushed down this, well, you sort of half engaged with this one bit of content, so let's show you more of that. And actually, maybe this is kind of like the sort of movements of a dying star in some ways on social media. And maybe that is in itself quite a profound prediction. Or maybe it's just someone rambling on the edge of a bed in a hotel room.
H. Allen talks about potatoes. You talk about the death of a dying star. I mean, they're one of my favourite people. They're a glorious human being. And I think more of those sorts of predictions that aren't predictions actively encouraged at all times.
I love that. That was great.
We are very appreciative. Next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Carolina Are, and today I will be sharing my predictions for what's going to happen in tech in 2026. Apologies for my voice. I have a cold, and I have been ranting about tech inequalities for quite a few weeks now after swathes of deletions from Meta and platforms. But I would say what I predict will happen in 2026 is more rage against the machine from users, and a wider disconnect between products created by big tech and users themselves. In the dating scene, for instance, already people have shown tiredness for apps, and in stories written by Crystal Cole Walker of Crashed himself, people have been using more hobby-based apps to get to know each other, or they have been connecting in real life. So I predict that hunger for connection in real life that is not mediated by apps that are trying to sell you something or just to steal your data is going to get greater. And hopefully that is going to create a bigger appetite for not just better regulation, but also better governance and better design, given that user buy-in is not hopefully to be taken for granted anymore.
There's so many things to unpick. Thank you, Carolina, who Instagram messaged and said you're now officially a friend of the show. So that's happened.
It's true. Made it official. Actually, as a friend of the show. It's a really interesting idea, and it's one that I think you can see this kind of return to roots in response to what we're seeing. The worry that I have is that many of those people, like me, would probably try and vibe code an app. And that way danger lies. But if it's done correctly, and I mean, there are people who do this. I mean, you see this in kind of the rise of people like the creator of Black Sky. Now, not necessarily an app in and of itself, but an attempt to try and amplify Black voices on Blue Sky in the early days of the social platform, when it was really starting to become popular as people abandoned Twitter and would be really desperate for that more personal connection that they once had on Twitter, but lost when Elon Musk took it over. And that had a really big grassroots growth that I think is excellent. I guess the challenge, is how do you do that in a world where these sort of big platforms are quite so entrenched? It's a really motivating thing to try and do. It's just in practice, I suppose it becomes quite difficult.
I think as social media particularly reverts, it's more of a broadcast app. It is less and less social as the years goes by. It's not about connecting with your friends, it's about watching stuff. So if you take the biggest social network to be YouTube and the second biggest social network to be TikTok, they're basically TV. And then, of course, it's not that reductive. Again, as discussed, watch the whole podcast. It's complicated. But it's more of a lean back. It's not an activating with your friends. It's not snapping your mates. It's engaging with creators who are working on a sort of television 2.0, but it's not a million miles away. And within that consumption, what then that means is people looking for connection away from just influencers. They're going to go back to real life or a version of the sort of Web3 decentralized social networks. And that means that conversations will happen in private. There'll be that safe space in a way that if a podcast doesn't offer that safe space, maybe a social network can, where screen grabs are banned and you can't copy and share. And it's almost Chatham House rules when it comes to where you talk about it. So I'm really optimistic about what could come from that space. The way that people are starting to use it means that those conversations and that sense of community is coming. I just don't know how quickly it can come.
That sounds like you're making the case for the return of Yik Yak.
Which one is Yik Yak? Is it, there was that one that was oi or hello or whatever it was, where you just said hello to everyone in the morning, whatever that was.
Hey, wasn't it? I think, or something like that. No, yo, it was yo, where you can only say yo. Yik Yak was like everybody was anonymous by default, and it, as with all of these things, started out with a really nice idealistic view, but it quickly became just a place for scurrilous gossip and kind of anonymous tip lines, effectively, to try and slander people, which is the big problem that we have with social media. A large part of it is big tech platforms causing problems, but another part of it is humans like to break stuff. Like we are our own worst enemies in many ways.
I think better than that. I think there is more chance of humans to make real connection. And you're right, we should not be allowed nice things. Yes, everything popular is wrong. It will get broken. I wholeheartedly, fundamentally believe that process. But in the meantime, if you look at the loneliness epidemic, if you look at the number of people who are clinically depressed, if you look at the people who are just making ends meet, if you look at all of these seemingly intractable problems, there is that thing of the more people you have to love, the less depressed you are. The more people you have to love you, that's less important, but the more of the community there is around you, there is a chance that can be recreated digitally. It's more likely that happens in real life, or even more likely it's a combination of the two. And how big tech or little tech or big government or little government gets its hands around that really present crisis is vital, not just for 2026 or beyond.
It's interesting that you're talking about the idea of needing personal connections, because we've seen with the rise of voice mode in AI that actually people are supplanting that human connection with that kind of tech first approach, which is something that we might want to talk about after a little short break, because I want to ask AI for some predictions of its own in 2026.
Hi Alex, hi Chris, and hello Crash listeners. I'm Chris Hamilton, co-founder and MD at AI comms advisory and tech company Albi, where we work with corporate affairs and communications teams on how AI is changing their world and, crucially, what to do about it. So my prediction for 2026 is that it'll be the year of the redesign, because corporate affairs and especially comms has spent a long time being the poor relation of marketing. It's less glamorous, gets fewer resources, it's harder to show impact and return on investment. And for the past decade, it's been trying to keep up with an information environment that just keeps accelerating. We've had channels and audiences fragmenting, trust is declining, and now, of course, AI is sweeping through everything. This time last year, a lot of people said 2025 would be the year teams move from AI experimentation to implementation. But in reality, for most businesses and comms teams, that just hasn't happened. What we've mostly seen is pockets of experimentation, some shadow AI, as it's called, a few pilots, lots of nervousness, and a lingering sense that it's still just kind of tactical. Lots of reworked emails and Word documents, but not a lot more. So 2026, I think we're going to hit a different moment, a realization that AI isn't just tactical, it's strategic, it's even existential. It's not just about bolting AI into the side of the existing comms machine. Leaders will likely start looking at everything, how their teams are organized, the skills people have, what tasks they're doing, and how work flows from idea to approval to publishing. What good even looks like when content, of course, can be produced at near infinite volume. And I think lots of teams will realize that a lot of what they're doing, frankly, just isn't fit for purpose anymore. So what does redesign look like? It's not just everyone learn prompting. It's things like fewer, clearer priorities, a shift from measuring outputs to proving impact, more deliberate governance, and above all, a hard look at where humans add judgment and where machines add speed. As we're starting to see with some of the clients that we're lucky enough to work with at Albi, the organizations that do this well won't just be faster, they'll be calmer, more consistent, and more strategic because they've rebuilt the function around the world as it is now, not the world as it was. Thanks for having me, Chris and Alex. Happy New Year to you and to all the Crash listeners. I'm wishing everyone all the best in 2026.
Welcome back. I'm taking over the hosting duties because all of this is on my shoulders, and if it fails, then that is my fault and my doing, and I am solely to blame. We thought that it might be worth using AI to see whether or not it can do as good a job, because I'm personally worried as a podcast host about the future of my career. It's only just started, but it might end up ending quicker than I thought. So we're putting generative AI to the test. You have tried Notebook LM in the past, Alex, right?
I have tried it. Washington Post has tried it with much controversy of making stuff up. It sounds like a machine is doing it. And I think so much of podcasting, as I hope you have found as listeners, watchers, is it's actually the human element, it's the community around it, it's the conversations you have. It is not being told by a robot a thing that is true or being talked around a serious issue. It is actually the community of it. And I think I did the newsletter in a conversation with an AI about 3 years ago. So this better be edgy and cool, Chris. I've got high hopes.
Well, I mean, you know me. If there's anything that you could use to describe me, it is edgy and cool. So I dumped, you were 3 years ago on this. Fine. That's great. Last year, I did the same sort of trick for Fast Company. I think it was, or was it the Wall Street Journal? I can't remember which, but I dumped a load of...
Humble brag.
Yeah, right. Well, you got to. You dump in a load of, tech analyst predictions around 2026 to an LLM. I think I used Notebook LM last time. Let me try here and invite ChatGPT, to the show. How are you doing? Welcome to Crashed.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here on Crashed. I'm doing well, and I'm really looking forward to diving into all the 2026 tech predictions with you and chatting about what's on the horizon. Let's jump right in whenever you're ready.
Okay, you don't need to do the weird ChatGPT thing. Have you ever used voice mode on ChatGPT, Alex? By the way, it's like this all the time.
I have.
Totally understood, and no worries at all. I'll just keep it nice and natural. Think of me as just another guest who's here to chat. No ChatGPT mode needed. Let's have a good conversation.
So cringy. It's so cringy.
It is, isn't it? It's so cringy. But anyway, I want to hear what the predictions are. So what are your key predictions for 2026? Disembodied voice on my phone.
Absolutely. Let's get into it. So one of the big themes for 2026 is that AI is basically becoming a lot less of a magic buzzword and a lot more like part of the plumbing of tech infrastructure. So instead of it being this wild new frontier, it's more about the nitty-gritty of making it work at scale. Things like data governance, integration, and making it affordable to actually run these AI systems continuously. And beyond that, we're seeing a lot of fragmentation. Countries are kind of setting their own rules about where data can live and who can run what, and that's reshaping how the tech landscape looks. So those are some of the big themes we can dive into.
Great. Well done. That's very vague and not very detailed.
Who is dating an LLM? Who is dating them? Who is going out with them? Who is listening to them? Who is thinking this is this better than search? Who is thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Well done, everybody. Who is? It is the absolute starting pistol of a reasonable Google result or an automated 800-word piece. None of that is engaging. I really struggle to listen to a single word of it, and I don't want to be a Luddite. I am massively in favour of progress and innovation and future and all of these things. There are so many digital relationships, non-traditional relationships with automated features like this. how are people falling in love with that? And not for this episode, 2026, the year where the loneliness epidemic really becomes even more profound because of the improvement of LLMs. None of that was useful. None of that was interesting. None of that was, and I think I in a way that you believe a voice, all the sort of studies is talking about, you believe voice way more than you believe text. So there's a big trust gap here. But what did she, don't gender them, what did it say?
It said nothing, and that's the whole point. I think to be fair, part of that is the fact that it's an LLM and the fact that it has, basically, well, it has no inherent knowledge. It has nothing interesting to say. It is aggregating all of its training data, but part of that is the training data as well. And it's worth pointing out the data that I fed it, those 2026 reports that are predicting stuff, they're often just vapid. They're very frequently wrong. That is the underlying issue that we have with prediction things like this, is generally people say either stuff that is so vague that it could be perceived as being correct with the benefit of hindsight, or they take big gambles and making outlandish statements and actually end up being completely wrong. Now, that's fine for a kind of fun, quirky, end of year, start of next year episode of a podcast. But when you're thinking about the more formal veneers that is given by companies like Big Four consulting firms or something like that, that put out these reports, they are just generally very vapid anyway. But I agree with you. This technology, as we get into 2026, is not yet ready for prime time, and we're a world away from AGI, right? This is supposedly the thing that we're on the cusp of. If you listen to that, not even in the slightest.
What chance do people have to, the risk of saying something controversial, the risk of being told no, or the risk of all of these things? People are so scared to act now that you can see that this is a space that LLMs fill, and the increasing amount of people who don't speak to people in real life for weeks or days, and the more and more digital relationships, whether that be friendships or otherwise, that we've talked about, pop up. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I guess the question for us is the extent to which politicians start to lean on this versus AI starts to sound even more like politicians and not actually answering the question. We're getting into an echo of the I rise to stand moment that has been inherited in the UK Parliament from the US.
I think one of my predictions for 2026 is actually the opposite. I think politicians start to speak their mind. If you look at the way that Mamdani has taken New York, if you look at the way that Trump's electoral success is based on saying what he means, and so much is built into even though we're post-authenticity, the actual authentic age within politics is still on its way to come. And so actually you'll see LLMs acting more like politicians of old, but politicians acting more like real human beings and being more fallible and saying, we didn't know this, we did know this, and being frank with their electorate. Seems like we're about to snap back in that sort of post-Blairite, post-Clintonite age of politicians speaking their mind more openly.
Well, on that, we're aligned, because one of my 2026 predictions was the more that we start to see these things permeate our lives, the more that we remember what it is to be including all of those flaws that we have as well. So good to be able to agree on one thing at least.
Next prediction.
Hi, I'm Paulita Pappel. I'm a porn producer, director, and entrepreneur. When I think about what the year 2026 holds for tech, and I'm specifically thinking about sex tech here, I would like to manifest a lot of tech literacy. Brand new technologies have been coming out over the last years and have already integrated into our everyday life, from AI romantic companionships to AI-powered sex toys, and of course, AI-generated erotic imagery. I believe we urgently need to educate people, to empower them, to understand the impact that these technologies have on our lives, and to learn how to use them safely. I believe we need accessible, inclusive resources, and I also believe these conversations and the creation of these resources need to be part of legislative discussions where sex workers should have a seat at the table.
So Paulita sent this through, and she sort of said, I'm not quite sure if this is a prediction or if this is manifesting what I want to happen. And I think that's a beautiful way of thinking about it. I think she is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to entrepreneurship. And she's a big advocate and a big activist in this space for better education and more awareness and less stigma and all of these things. And the thing I really want to pick out from that prediction is the round of AI companionship. And I know we've talked about it, but the idea that she doesn't necessarily see that as a bad thing, just there needs to be more literacy and more education about it. I think that's a really interesting and different perspective, because I always thought that actually the end of human relationships, or the augmentation of relationships, or that sort of weird uncanny valley where you see, particularly in Eastern Asia, around carers for elderly people being more robotized and more automated. I think that's a sort of scary end game. Whereas actually, if you see it in a more positive angle, in a way that can be actually additive to relationships rather than a replacement of. And that's something I hadn't really thought about or got my head around yet.
Yeah, it needs to be and rather than either or, though, doesn't it? That is the key thing. And I suppose part of the problem is that what Paulita's done is introduce a level of nuance that we often don't hear from the big tech companies. They often scream and holler about the fact that they're going to be developing transformational technologies, talking about a future in which humans are increasingly less needed in certain areas, including often in... When she was talking about it, I was thinking this is entirely opposite to the area in which she works, but there's a huge discussion going on at the minute. Many people will have opened up their Christmas presents who have children and will have maybe given their kids an AI-enabled toy at the big day itself. Huge concerns around the safety of that.
Santa will have delivered them AI toys.
Santa will have delivered them. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, they will have opened them from Santa and his elves. His elves will have coded the AI, but the elves did a very bad job because sometimes the AI goes off the rails. And there is this discussion of the fact that we should just automatically ban all AI toys because all AI toys are evil. But actually, there could be benefits to them in terms of socializing children into learning about the world, learning about relationships, practicing some of those things that they are often quite awkward at. For instance, when you get a bunch of particularly sort of toddler-age kids, they struggle sometimes to make that first connection of friendship with one another. If they can practice that in a way that is useful, rather than just a complete replacement of it, that might be an interesting way to develop that.
I think Paulita, I think we're going to continue chatting with her on Crash, because I think the way that she sees the world is fascinating, and the way that she understands how to operate in a difficult industry is really, really captivating.
Hi, Rowan Ferguson, Policy and Public Affairs Manager at Molly Rose Foundation. Molly Rose Foundation is a suicide prevention and online safety charity aimed at under 25s. We were set up by the family and friends of Molly Russell, who died aged 14 after being repeatedly exposed to harmful content glorifying suicide and self-harm on social media. 2026 is an absolutely crucial year for online safety. It's now fast approaching a year since Ofcom, the regulator, began implementing the Online Safety Act. And despite their claims that their measures are game-changing for children's online safety, our view, and the view of many others, is that we need to be going much further and much faster to protect children from harm online. So as it stands, and as online threats continue every day to grow in complexity and in scale, children are being let down by a regulator whose unambitious approach simply isn't up to the task and will fail to deliver the safety outcomes that both Parliament and parents intended when the Online Safety Act was initially passed. So 2026 will be over 8 years since Molly died after encountering harmful content on social media, and should be a vital inflection point for the future of online safety in the UK. Molly Rose Foundation are calling for the government to take urgent action to fix this broken regime and introduce new legislation that strengthens the Online Safety Act. And this should focus in a few key areas. First, new legislation should reset the regime around harm reduction, introducing a new harm reduction duty on the regulator Ofcom that requires them to deliver annual improvements in children's safety, recentering the regime on what matters. Second, there should be a reasserted overarching duty of care so that platforms have to do far more than comply with Ofcom's narrow codes and take action to address all of the risks they're aware of on their platforms. And finally, it should include the introduction of new proactive transparency duties on platforms, shifting the power dynamic from the regulator having to ask the right questions to companies being liable if they fail to disclose information about preventable harm on their services. And alongside strengthen regulation and product safety, 2026 also offers a great opportunity to strengthen education and action from the bottom up, empowering children to navigate online spaces in a safe, healthy, and critical way. And this is a really strong opportunity to do this. We've recently had new RSHE guidance that includes expanded areas in the curriculum around mental well-being and suicide prevention, and the recommendations of the Independent Curriculum and Assessment Review have also put additional weight on media and digital literacy. And finally, there are real prizes for getting online safety right. Alongside saving lives and protecting children from harm, online safety is good for economic growth. DCIT's own modelling shows that a 15% reduction in online harm delivers £4 billion in annualised economic return.
That's a really fascinating prediction from Rowan. Thank you for sharing that with us. Very, very grateful. The Molly Rose Foundation obviously doing very important work in terms of protecting children online. I took from that 2026 prediction is basically the Online Safety Act, Australia's social media ban that we saw in 2025. They are not the end of this story, and they are not by any means perfect solutions to this problem. Again, in keeping with the theme of the programme, the theme of our show, feels a little bit like there's a question to which there are no real good answers.
I mean, that's what you get with Crash, light and shade. I mean, how do you respond to such a sort of deep, thorough, profound discussion around people at the absolute edge of this experience? I think, again, like they were saying, it is complicated. Like they are saying, removing young people from social media is not the answer, and that's more. It's very complicated. There are no easy answers, like you said, Chris. And I think if we believe in experts, which hopefully on this podcast we do, and we looking to the narratives that are happening, what are the best ways to keep young people safe? Assuming that's a good thing, which it is. What is the best step to make sure that we don't fall behind, or we work in a sort of collegiate way across countries, across borders? I mean, I think obviously he is much more storied and much more deep in this than I could ever be. So I think it's a fascinating insight. I'm keen to sort of start my learning journey around that rather than being able to respond to it on a sort of equal basis.
Yeah, I think are going to see in 2026 as well, particularly in this online safety space around kids, the first evidence of really verifiable data. And that is important for answering that really difficult question of what happens when you grow up online in a smartphone and social media age. Because we don't know yet, right? There is no reputable data that can give you at a population level the impact of what happens if you're exposed to this versus the impact of if you are entirely offline. There is going to be an evidence base that will tell us and give us some firmer answers to this. I was up early speaking to researchers in Australia who were looking at child safety for a BBC Science Focus story that will be coming out in the new year on precisely this. And they were very energised about the fact that they are going to be able to get some proper data looking at this. It's not just Australia. There are Australian universities working in partnership with those in the United States and in the UK specifically on this population level data that we're going to get with the online safety movements in Australia that are outright banning use of social media for under 16s.
And now we have no idea which way we're recording this in. We have no idea which order it's going out in. So this is probably a break between part 2 and part 3, but we don't know because we haven't recorded the first bit yet. But we will see you in a second.
My name is Robert Forrest. I'm a car designer turned advisor. I work a lot with startups, particularly around technology, largely in automotive as well. One thing we're going to see more of in 2026 will be AVs. We've already seen massive noise around Amazon, around Zoox, around Uber. There's been a tie-up around Wave and Nissan as well. And this already provides a really strong clue about how AVs are going to reach mass adoption. But they are still a mainstream offer. That's really around convenience and flexibility. The business value is coming from resource utilization and not paying overheads, rather than actually a value add to the user. You're still going to be able to get your car within a few minutes and take you to where you want to go. So from a customer level, there isn't actually a big shift other than getting used to someone not driving you. And whereas from the business perspective, there is potentially some saving there. Let's see how far that goes. One company we don't see really being represented in automotive right now is Meta. It really feels like, that's a bit of a vacuum in their portfolio. And I do kind of wonder how they will fill that. Obviously, Apple has taken a step back from the Titan project, focused on the software instead with CarPlay. But what is going to be Meta's offer when it comes to mobility? This is one thing we need to kind of watch this space for.
Welcome back to either part 2 or part 3, or this might be the beginning, because we're recording this with the most old school way of we're sending each other videos, we're talking through videos, we don't know where we are, we don't really know what day it is, we've been podcasting for 2 hours already, everything is a blur. But more predictions are coming. We are on to either the first one or the 5th one or the last one. Nobody knows. We're losing our minds. But here we go.
My name is Jo Eckersley, and I'm an innovator working alongside companies in the tech sector. When people ask me what the future of tech looks like in 2026, I keep coming back to something from Able Media called the frozen middle. There's still a bit of a myth that businesses are all surging ahead with AI, but this report looks at the reality, why AI adoption is stalling in mid-market businesses. For all its fault lines, hallucinations and adoption challenges, it's not actually the AI that's failing. It's the organisations at a shocking scale that is absolutely exposing the flimsy foundations that a lot of them run on. We saw the same thing in the early days of digital transformation. Businesses rushed to buy tools before fixing their foundations. They layered on lots of new technology on top of broken processes, fragmented data, data lakes forming, and cultures that weren't ready to change. You'd think we'd have learnt really when it came to tech, to be honest. But no! Yes, leaders know AI matters. Yes, teams and individuals are experimenting down on the ground. But everything in between, culture, skills, incentives, ownership, it's literally freezing any progress at all. There are literally thousands of frozen, failed AI projects and companies either rebooting or killing AI adoption off altogether. The tech challenge for 2026 is that the person who authorised the spend demands proof of return on investment before anyone has learned how to actually use the darn AI inside tools. The winners won't be the businesses with the most AI tools. They'll be the ones who invested in understanding how AI actually fits their organisation. I think in business is the ecosystem around the tech that will change the most. We'll see a rise in AI consultancy that's less about the tech and more about translation. People who understand data, workflows, people, politics and risk. That's what I think the future of tech really looks like in 2026. Less hype and a lot more reality.
That's an interesting prediction, one that we haven't really looked at all that much on the podcast, which is we focused a lot on the consumer side, we focused a lot on the politics, but we haven't really looked at the business impact. And the reality is 2025, I think, was very much the year that people just threw AI at the problem within businesses and hoped that it would sort itself out. It's kind of putting a sticking plaster on the issue and thinking that they can use it very well. But what she talks about there, really important, you have to actually make sure that this works. You can't just keep going into this panicked response of trying to solve things as they keep going. So, yeah, 2026, I think, will be a year in which we see a lot of businesses go, actually, why are we doing this? Why have we put AI into this part of our organization? And are we really seeing the ROI on it?
So thank you, Joe. So I met Joe at a potato event of Crashed Phone. We talked about that a few episodes ago, and then they invited us, spoilers, they invited us to do the Paulita in January, so hopefully we'll get that. And now I've said it on air, so if it doesn't, it's their fault. But Joe, really appreciate it. I think you're right, and you're much better versed in this than I am, but actually the point around it being not just what the ROI is, but also what do we want to do with this? What is our? We're not just going to buy into this thing because it says AI on the box. We need to actually work out what the business case is, and if it does become this commodity that everyone is using, as Joe is entirely right about, actually, what's our point of difference? Where do we stand out? What do we add to this process, and how do we not just fall for another marketing release?
Indeed. Let's move on to the next one.
Hi, my name is Alex Voica. I'm the head of corporate affairs at Synesthesia, the world's largest AI video platform for the enterprise. 2026 will be the year where AI stops being a tool that employees sometimes open, and becomes the default path that work takes through a company. We'll see end-to-end workflows, not just one-off prompts. Right now, most AI use is, write me an email or summarize a meeting or suggest some code. But in 2026, more companies will give models ownership of the entire low-risk process, with humans supervising that work. I think that's what we'll start to see real productivity gains, not just, AI save me 7 minutes for writing a Slack message. I don't think 2026 will be the year of mass unemployment, but I do think it will be a year where job descriptions are going to be different. So analysts will spend less time building models in Excel and more time interrogating AI scenarios and kind of pressure testing assumptions. Sales and support reps will spend less time typing and more time handling nuance, negotiations, and edge cases. So the people who win will be the ones who learn to manage workflows and systems, not just tasks. I think one other thing that will happen is small and medium-sized businesses will get enterprise-grade leverage for free. So big companies so far have been the only ones running pilots and hiring aggressively in AI. Small businesses have been mostly stuck with generic tools. As the app layer matures, a small team using off-the-shelf AI native tools will be able to do things that recently required a whole department. And we'll also start to see real differentiation between AI native and AI lagging companies. You'll see companies that generally rebuild workflows around AI, and they will ship faster, respond to customers faster, and run maybe with smaller teams. And then you have companies that just put a chatbot on top of an old process and then wonder why nothing has changed.
I think the thing that we've learned through this episode is actually just how good people are at autocue and how much scripting has improved and how much more comfortable people are in front of a camera. I feel like had we done this 2 years ago, and particularly if we'd done this pre-COVID, the level of comfort in front of a camera would be so much different. I think with this, I mean, he's right. So I think that's the first thing. But it's to the extent to which he is right, I don't think I'm that sure on. So you probably know more about that than I do.
Yeah, so I mean, Alex, obviously, and really grateful for him providing his prediction. I think he was battling a sinus infection. So thanks very much, Alex. Works at Synesthesia. Obviously, they are very much at the forefront of developing these AI voice and vision models so they can effectively do AI avatars of people that are really high fidelity. You've probably seen them either on a TV show or in a newspaper or on a website in some way. They've been very good in terms of interacting with the press on this. So yes, with the caveat that obviously Alex is deeply embedded in this space and is very bullish on it, I do, however, think that we are going to see, and it kind of ties in with a similar prediction from our friend at Potato, talking about really 2026 is going to be the year in which AI goes from within organizations, something that is just kind of a bolt-on or is done individually, ad hoc, and in a way that can often be quite rough and ready, to perhaps a little bit more of codified use. And he was talking there about the powers of agentic AI. And when I looked at agentic AI for New Scientist a few months ago, certainly was not ready quite for prime time. Talked previously about the fact that it wanted to invoice, I think, £8,001 for a single story, which I would have been fine with, but New Scientist really very much weren't. I think that you will start to see some tech companies that are very much forward-facing, utilizing way more of this. And I think that there will be a trickle-down element to this. Maybe not as much as Alex says, because I think there is always this barrier to use where people are either suspicious or they think that it's not worth their time, or they are worried, and he acknowledged this in the talk, about the impact that it might have on employment. So people are kind of holding out because they worry that they're effectively being turkeys that vote for Christmas. I'm aware that this is January the 1st now, so apologies for the belabored Christmas pun. But I do think that you will start to see people realizing, well, actually, it hasn't replaced my job yet. I've been told that's going to replace my job for 3 years now. Maybe I am safe to try and dabble.
Right. That is a lot of predictions. And a lot of time, and we gave people between 10 seconds and 10 minutes. And I'm not sure how we're going to edit it, but there were some longer than 10 seconds. I'm just saying. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone who gave their predictions. It is such a smorgasbord of light and shade and funny and serious and really profound issues and ridiculous ones. And I think that is to the strength of our listeners and to the strength of friends of Crashed. I think that is a beautiful, wonderful smorgasbord of what might come. So yeah, thank you to everyone. And we will be back next week because now we're in 2026 apparently, which is great.
Time keeps moving on. I'm very excited to see what 2026 brings in the world of tech, and I'm very excited to continue to bring it to all of our listeners' ears.
So Crashes and Everything Popular is Wrong production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. And title music is from Nuffer. Check them out on all of those streamers. Hosted by Aircast, assisted by Riverside Studios, and we are published every Thursday morning. Get in touch if you want to say how great we are at Alex Hudds or at Stokel across most of the social networks. You have to search for Chris a little bit harder. But if you want to support the podcast, go to crash.substack.com or search for Crash Podcast on Substack or Google or whatever the hell you want. We will see you next Thursday.